We are losing too many lives. That day, as we sat on the freezing concrete floor of that empty building in northern Albania, Bazart's grandmother said, "The day we stop laughing, they will win. Every evening, every day, no matter what we go through, who dies and how, can one still find a reason to laugh?" Not until much later did we find out that laughter is a form of defiance. Bazart's grandmother knew it then. It wouldn't be appropriate to say it was the Albanians who discovered methods of civil disobedience. Children in Darfur also laugh. Children always laugh. Women as well. If death is a given, so is laughter.
The boat, which was headed for Lesbos, capsized. And then there's the readmission agreement that is signed to seal the fate of those caught on the border crossings. According to the agreement, those caught will be returned to where they set off from. Now they call them irregular migrants. They used to call them illegal. Someone must have finally realized that a human being cannot be illegal, and that itself is a gain. Geneva must have heard Bazart's grandmother laughing.
The Aegean and the Mediterranean combined is turning into one big cemetery. As the dead amass, we diminish. We slowly fade away. We become less human, less mother, less child, less innocent. How many deaths are worth one readmission agreement? How many inflatable dinghies have gone missing in the Aegean? There are small purses on the seabed. They lay down deep, pink. There are dinghies washed ashore, rocks, seagulls, seabirds, and deflated dinghies.
In a cove in the southwest, families with inflatable swimming aids in hand pass a group of women doing yoga on the beach. If Bazart's grandmother was here, she would laugh. Laughter is an act of defiance.
If everyone throws their heads back in laughter, can readmission agreements be cancelled? Will wars end? All winter we kept on hearing about human traffickers getting arrested in cities along the Aegean shore. Then there is the news story from a local newspaper about that young captain who committed suicide because the yacht he worked on was involved, without him knowing it, in human smuggling.
Every day we find ourselves diminished. As the dead amass, we slowly fade away. We become less human, less mother, less child, less innocent. How many deaths are worth one readmission agreement?
In Istanbul, my friends have organized amongst themselves and formed a distribution network to help refugee families. They help those that take shelter in dilapidated buildings and abandoned neighborhoods on the verge of gentrification. Every weekend, they bring food for the families. They say the students are organizing aid runs as well. Years ago, on the front courtyard of one of the churches in Istanbul, on a Saturday morning as the city folk slept, people distributed soup. There in that courtyard, a Congolese man waiting in the queue started telling me about his camera, which he said he had to leave behind in Congo. A Congolese reporter waiting for a cup of soup at a churchyard in Istanbul. If everyone throws their head back in laughter, can readmission agreements be cancelled? Will wars end? Will the Congolese reporter be able to go back to his country? And if he does, will he be able to survive? And then there is hunger. Hunger as an epidemic in places where war was and has now gone. If there is no war, then there is hunger, and it is pervasive. So when those irregular migrants are sent back to their point of origin, will they be able to survive?
Why would anyone leave their home in the first place? Why risk death for life? Isn't it the Mediterranean that lies between absolute death and probable death? One inflatable dinghy, a few buoyancy aids.
With the siege on Aleppo, analysts in all news channels have been talking of a new possible wave of refugees northbound towards the Turkish border. Is a wave of refugees something similar to an actual wave? For instance, if it is strong enough, does it have the same destructive power? When the wind blows southerly, the sea picks up in Istanbul. Waves hit the shore with such force that they move massive cement blocks along the promenade. One person cannot lift those blocks. They are so heavy. But if the wind is strong enough, it takes only a couple of strong waves for those blocks to be lifted, thrown in the air, and come crashing down. So is this wave that they are talking about the one that is due north from Aleppo? Is it similar to waves of that magnitude? Will it come crashing on our humanity, lift it, throw it in the air, and bring it back down in shards? So maybe that is why they're building blast walls along the southern border, so that refugees, when they come in one massive wave, can crash on these walls and fall back. T-walls.
They have the same walls in Iraq, in different shapes and sizes around checkpoints. If anyone had asked the Iraqi officials about these walls before they started building them in the southern border, they would be told cement blocks soak up the intensity of a blast, and instead of spreading it horizontally, it expands vertically, way, way up towards the sky. Just like a wind that cannot go around skyscrapers, so it goes upwards instead, sweeps from above, and comes crashing down on the other side of the buildings. We call that a puff, and if you are sailing, you don't see it coming. It appears suddenly, and if you're not prepared, your boat may capsize. So will this new wave of refugee blown toward us by the strong winds of proxy wars, will it hit those T-walls, go up, and then suddenly come crashing down in any part of the country? Being a refugee is a legal concept, and a refugee is a human being, like you and me. A photographer takes a shot, publishes it with a short caption that reads, "Refugee Family." Would one ask, is it a profession? Will being a refugee be handed down from father to son? Being a refugee is a legal status detailed in the Geneva Convention. These conventions are important. They lay out definitions. They are there to make your work as a journalist easy. If you are a photojournalist and know these definitions, you take a photo, you write the words refugee family underneath, file it, and watch it become the next headline. The photograph and the family turn into reliable consumables, which in turn will be forgotten in less than 3 days.
There are too many rubber dinghies washed ashore. Turkish government recently announced their new tourism action plan, but the plan does not include any action towards cleaning the shoreline. Me, for example, when I go to a southern resort in the summer, will I place my beach towel over the remnants of the deflated dinghy or next to it? I think all these details need to be covered by the tourism action plan. Action plans, international agreements, conventions, they are all here for humanity. But since humanity will come crashing on the T-walls, it will never reach us. Even if it did, if it doesn't know how to swim, it will go down in the mass grave we now call the Mediterranean. How many deaths are worth one readmission agreement? Turkish officials have been warned, and they went and took the cultural insignia left as a president from the United States to Iraq, the T-walls, and fitted them along our southern border. What matters is national security. Do we feel safe? Maybe the waters of the Mediterranean are more secure. At least the refugees seem to think so.
Sakir Hanim had told me in Imishli, "You will also leave. You will also forget us." Sakir Hanim, I never forgot you. Even in Azerbaijan, even if the world forgot, I never did. Don't worry. Then there's Kosovo in 97, Bosnia in 95. I never forgot them either. 2000, Afghanistan, 1999, Iraq, 2003, Iraq, 2011, Iraq, always Iraq.
One night in Baghdad, bored, sitting indoors, tucked in by sandbags, we decided to sit outside for a change. You smoked shisha. Then, a couple streets north of us, a car bomb went off. There was so much noise. Despite the sandstorm, the whole block had lit up like day. Visibility is nil in sandstorms, but if you close your nose and mouth and don your protective glasses, it doesn't hurt. Children in Darfur do not have protective glasses. They do not hurt. People attempting to cross the seas are not really dying either. They do not really drown. They are merely statistics. Numbers don't drown, but then their bodies naughtily wash ashore. Deflated dinghies leave us with inflated corpses. Corpses are not beautiful.
Remember when they opened the mass graves in Kosovo? Better yet, remember the country's borders had opened and we were among the first to go in? Your family was in Suva Reka, and you wanted to see if they were still alive. And me? Well, I was happy to go in, be among the first to photograph. Minefields were everywhere. Men actually plant mines in fields. Do mines flower? I never saw one, but I saw a British TV crew push a bunch of cows in a field in hopes of finding those flowers.
Turns out, cows blow up on camera acts as appropriate B-roll for the news package they were putting together for prime time.
Do you remember how many cows had blown up that day? I didn't get an accurate count, but the country smelled of corpses as we crossed the border. It is understandable. The war had just ended, and no one had had a chance to open the windows to Kosovo to let it air out. We found the windows to your home shattered. Walls were burned, some broken down. It doesn't matter, you said. It's my home. I will rebuild it. The children were looking for the mine flowers in your overgrown garden.
How many wars can fit into one lifetime, Sekar Hanum? No, I never forgot you. Death sometimes comes in bits. Remember Cookie? Remember we had met her in one of those dilapidated old buildings overlooking a tiny Ottoman cemetery in Istanbul? You had taken me there. Ethiopian-style coffee ceremony, you said. Cookie was schizophrenic. Armed militia had raided her village and gang-raped her, and left her to die in the bush, bleeding, crawling. She had managed to come out alive, run, and somehow take refuge in our country. But she couldn't tell her story to anyone without them raising a brow. How many corpses can one fit between the Oma Valley and Istanbul? Surviving is a problem altogether. All those men doing all those things to you, and your mind wanders. So you cross the sea with the remnants of your sanity, only to find doors closing on your face, and you are left with no alternative but to sell what is left of your flesh in stinky hotel rooms for a dime. It has nothing to do with faith, democracy, justice, or anything else. Our humanity has been buried deep underneath those T-walls on the border. Our seas have long turned into cemeteries. Is it too much that Cookie lost her mind? Plus, how many wars can fit into one lifetime, Sekar Hanum? So many have fitted into mine that I've lost count. And there is that much more to come. They are getting ready. I can see them. Afghanistan, Iraq minus Syria. You got Libya.
Remember the attack on the United Nations compound in Kabul? Remember there was one man there, I saw on TV, an ordinary Afghan who had taken a rifle that must have fallen from the hands of the assailants, and he was trying to smash it against the pavement. I understand him. It all starts with that rifle. If Kalashnikov had not made the discovery of the century, would we have so much bloodshed today? What if, instead of inventing the AK-47, he designed wheat that could withstand drought, and then distributed that wheat for free to nations across the globe? The UN, for instance, they would be bored to death. And then there are those parties with vested financial interests. Supply and demand determine the price of things. When there's too much of one thing, it becomes worthless. There are so many wars, and there's so much hatred. So wars must be cheap, and the cheapest thing in the world must be hatred. Would the wholesale price of wars and hatred combine to buy one AK-47? I don't think so. But it may certainly buy us one Alan Kurdi. Do you know that we still do not have a refugee strategy, but we have a tourism action plan? The geographical limitation we placed on the 1967 Geneva Protocol is still there. How many Alans is one return ticket to Geneva? I say at least one. But we need to ask Alan's father, his aunt. They are the ones who are still holding on to the ghost of a small child after all. And then there's Alan's brother. It turns out he was scared of getting in the water, but Canada did not want them.
In Afghanistan in 2001, there were no T-walls. There were thick ropes that went around Kabul, and men who held those ropes. If you wanted to leave the city early in the morning, one of those men would come by your vehicle and check your ID. Remember when I ran out of film and you arranged a seat on a cargo plane for me so I could leave the country? En route to the airport, we had a flat tire. It was only 100 meters to the plane. I could see it, but I had too much equipment. A driver had asked for $100 for 100 meters. So if 100 meters is worth $100, would the wholesale price of hatred be worth a pinch of humanity?